Hey viewers! Hope you're all doing great. Before I start the story, tell me in the comments which country you're watching from and what time it is there. And if you enjoy my videos, don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe. The brutal pirate life that would break you in a day. Once, across the roaring oceans and through the mists that swirl below distant horizons, there rose the figure of the pirate. A marauder of the seas, an outlaw beyond laws, feared by merchants and navies alike. The golden age of piracy, roughly from the 1650s to the 1730s, is when the legends took shape. Blackbeard and Bonnie, Calico Jack, Bartholomew Black Bart Roberts, and many nameless souls. But beneath the romantic veneer, the Jolly Roger flag snapping in the wind, the plundered treasure chests, the dashing swordsman, lay a far harsher, grimier reality. The life of a pirate was brutal, short, and unforgiving. This is a story of what one would endure. Salt-chapped skin, scurvy, wounds, mutiny, storms, disease, fear, betrayal. This is no fairy tale. You would not survive. Let us now drift together into that stormy past. Let the salt breeze and the groan of timbers fill your mind. As we wander the decks, hear creaking ropes and the hiss of waves. Imagine the smell of brine and blood. We begin. In the late 17th and early 18th centuries, distant colonial powers carved empires across the seas. Ships laden with silver from the Americas, spices from Asia, silks, sugar, tobacco. The oceans were arteries of wealth. To block or to plunder, to intercept riches, to live outside the constraints of colonial authority. The temptation was great. Many pirates began as sailors, privateers, or indentured servants. During wars, governments issued letters of marque, commissioning private ships to raid enemy vessels. But when peace returned, many of these sailors found themselves unemployed, adrift, or in debt. Some turned to piracy not out of romance, but desperation. The pirate life promised booty, autonomy, and escape, but in truth demanded brutality, constant vigilance, and a high price in human suffering. The pirates selected their targets carefully. A richly laden Spanish galleon was far more tempting than a small fishing sloop. But the risks were enormous. To approach, to board, to fight, often under fire, meant many would die. Ships sank, men fell from rigging, swords slipped, gunpowder misfired. The sea was unforgiving, and pirates not spared. And even after victory, the division of spoil, the threat of betrayal, and the chance of recapture haunted every moment. To survive, a pirate band needed structure. Not chaotic violence, but order. Many pirate vessels operated under a written or oral pirate code, or articles, that each crew member swore to follow. Violations, theft from the common stock, desertion in battle, sexual violence, failing one's duty, were met with severe punishments. Marooning, flogging, or execution. The code often included shared voting rights, division of spoils, and compensation for injuries. A lost limb carried a monetary payout. Still, these rules did not guarantee safety. The ship itself was a cramped, dangerous machine. The hull groaned. The timbers flexed under storm and cannon fire. Sailcloth shredded, ropes frayed, the hull seams leaked. Below decks, rats scurried, food spoiled, water turned brackish. The galley was meager. A pirate's diet often lacked fresh produce. Scurvy, dysentery, and malnutrition lurked. Many pirates died not in battle but from disease and malnutrition. Sleep was elusive. Watch duty, storms, night raids, the constant threat of attack. The crew seldom rested fully. Injuries from battles or accidents went untreated or poorly treated. Infection was a common death sentence. Moreover, the ship's officers, the captain, the quartermaster, the boatswain, the gunner, the carpenter, the navigator, had vital roles. But each was subordinate under stress. Insurrections, mutiny, or internal conflict were always possible. Trust was fragile. Once a pirate ship approached its prey, the terror began. Canisters of grape shot, cannon smoke, musket volleys, screaming men. Boarding an enemy vessel was a descent into chaos. Those caught in the open deck could be cut down. Those below deck might be trapped or suffocated. Swords clashed, pistols cracked, timber splintered. Many pirate captains cultivated a fearsome reputation. Blackbeard himself wove slow-burning fuses into his beard and lit them in battle, so that smoke curled around his face, making him appear demonic. The hope was psychological warfare. An enemy crew might surrender without full resistance out of fear. But parts of that image are folklore. The burden of maintaining such theater was high. If the enemy resisted fiercely, pirates would slaughter, or else cripple the ship's crew, leave them adrift, take the prize and sail away. Sometimes they would kill or seize captives for ransom or to populate their own crew. Sometimes they would maroon captives on remote islands. The violence was indiscriminate. But battle was not always glorious. Many pirates were wounded. Slashes, bullet wounds, shattered bones, burned flesh. Medical care was primitive. No antiseptics, no sterile dressings, little knowledge of infection. Many died weeks later of wounds, gangrene or fever. Even victorious boarding did not guarantee success. The prize ship might sink under damage. Pirates might miscalculate water currents, suffer storm damage during transit, or be overtaken by naval forces. The sea, though it glittered blue under a high Caribbean sun, was a relentless enemy. Between their brief moments of plunder, pirates lived through endless stretches of monotony, discomfort and fear. The deck was hot enough to blister bare feet by noon, and the nights cold and wet with sea spray. Clothes were stiff with salt, bodies unwashed for weeks. Every crevice of the ship reeked. Tar, sweat, rotting wood, fish, gunpowder, rum. Food was always scarce. Hardtack, a dry biscuit made of flour and water, became riddled with weevils. Salted meat, when available, was so tough it had to be hammered before eating. Water in barrels turned green with slime, but was drunk anyway, mixed with rum to mask the taste. Scurvy, caused by the lack of vitamin C, made gums rot and teeth fall out. Flesh ulcerated. Pirates became too weak to climb the rigging or fight. Some captains tried to acquire citrus fruit from coastal settlements, but most simply endured the decay. Diseases spread quickly. The cramped decks, fleas, and rats brought typhus. Mosquitoes carried malaria and yellow fever. Dysentery, the bloody flux, left men writhing with pain and dehydration. There were no doctors aboard, only a surgeon, often a failed barber or butcher. Amputation was done with a saw, no anesthesia, only a bottle of rum and the strength of one's shipmates to hold the patient down. Many fainted or died mid-procedure. When weather turned foul, storms punished them. Ships could capsize easily. Lightning split masts, waves tore sails. Men were flung overboard and lost to the deep, their cries drowned by thunder. There was no ceremony for the dead, only a few words and a body sliding off a plank into the dark. Sometimes they did not even bother. The sea took who it wanted. And always there was waiting, waiting for wind, for prey, for calm. The sea gave little mercy. Strangely, amid all this chaos, pirate ships were among the few places where ordinary men could vote. The captain was elected and could be deposed if he failed to satisfy the crew. The quartermaster managed supplies and settled disputes. Spoils were divided according to agreed shares, a rough form of democracy afloat. Yet this democracy was brutal. Decisions were made through fear as much as reason. Disobedience could mean flogging with a cat-o'-nine-tails, a whip tipped with iron. Theft from the common stock, striking a superior, or cowardice in battle could lead to marooning, being left alone on a barren island with no food or water. Some were left with a pistol and one shot, to end their suffering. Still, for many sailors used to the tyranny of naval discipline, piracy offered freedom. On naval or merchant ships, sailors were often beaten, underfed, and unpaid. On a pirate ship, all shared equally in danger and reward. This sense of equality, though crude, bound crews together. But trust was brittle. Rum and suspicion led to quarrels. Crew members accused each other of hiding gold or plotting mutiny. Such disputes ended with duels on deck, cutlasses flashing, bare feet sliding in the rain. Sometimes the victor didn't survive long either. Revenge was constant. Few women sailed as pirates, but those who did became legends. And Bonnie and Mary Red, both active around 1718 with Calico Jack Rackham, disguised themselves as men and fought ferociously in battle. Contemporary trial records confirm their existence. They were exceptions in a world that viewed women aboard as bad luck. Pirates were often outcasts. Escaped slaves, indigenous sailors, and men of all nations joined crews. The Caribbean and West African coasts became melting pots of languages: English, Dutch, French, Akan, Spanish, Portuguese. Among pirates, a man's color mattered less than his loyalty, though equality was imperfect. Some pirate crews freed enslaved Africans from captured ships and gave them choice: join us or be set free. Others continued to trade them. The pirate world mirrored the cruelty of its age. The hidden coves of Nassau in the Bahamas, Port Royal in Jamaica, and Tortuga off Hispaniola became their temporary havens. There, pirates repaired ships, spent their gold on rum and company, and plotted their next raids. These ports reeked of spilled liquor, sweat, and gunpowder. In the brothels and taverns, the night echoed with shouting and music. Drums, fiddles, and laughter mixed with violence. Yet even in port they were hunted. The colonial powers could not tolerate these floating republics forever. Naval patrols tightened. Rewards were posted for the capture of notorious captains. The so-called king's pardons promised clemency to those who surrendered, but few trusted them. Edward Teach, known as Blackbeard, became the most infamous of them all. Operating from 1716 to 1718. His flagship, the Queen Anne's Revenge, terrorized the West Indies and the American coast. Witnesses described his enormous frame, the burning fuses tied into his beard, and the many pistols slung across his chest. His image was part myth, part psychological warfare. He blockaded Charleston, South Carolina, holding an entire city hostage for medical supplies. Not gold, but medicine. Yet despite his fearsome image, records show he often avoided unnecessary killing. He used terror to control, not slaughter. In 1718, the British Royal Navy cornered him at Ocracoke Inlet, North Carolina. In a fierce battle, he was struck by 5 musket balls and 20 sword wounds before he fell. His severed head was hung from the Navy ship's bowsprit as a warning. The age of the Pirate King was ending. The sea quiets now in your mind. Imagine the creak of wood, the gulls crying above an empty horizon. Still the story continues. By the 1720s, the seas had grown smaller for pirates. Once, Nassau in the Bahamas had been a bustling republic of rogues. Taverns overflowing, ships anchored side by side, men trading stolen silks, rum and sugar. But the Royal Navy began its slow chokehold. Governors, once bribed or too weak to interfere, were replaced by men sent to restore order. In 1718, Woodes Rogers arrived as the new governor of the Bahamas. A former privateer himself, he understood the pirate mind. He came bearing the king's pardon, offering forgiveness to those who surrendered within a year. Hundreds did. Rogers' policy was a mix of mercy and iron. Those who refused were hunted down. Charles Vane fled. Rackham, Bonnie, and Red were captured. The pirate republic fell. Beyond Nassau, other havens crumbled. Port Royal had already been swallowed by an earthquake in 1692, as if the earth itself rejected its corruption. Tortuga's chaos faded. The sea that had once hidden its outlaws became a trap. Naval ships patrolled every trade route. The dream of the free sea was dying. Yet for a few years more, pirates still haunted the waters. Along the African coast, in Madagascar's coves, and near the Indian Ocean trade lanes, they sought what profit they could. Henry Every, who captured the treasure-laden Ganj Isawai of the Mughal Empire in 1695, became the most wanted man on earth. His act outraged the powerful Mughal Emperor Aurangzeb and strained England's eastern trade. Every vanished without a trace, but his myth endured. By 1726, the Golden Age had turned to rust. The last great captains swung from gibbets, their bodies tarred and hung at harbor mouths, a warning to all who dreamed of rebellion. Captured pirates rarely lived long. Naval crews treated them as vermin, unworthy of mercy. Once taken, they were shackled in the ship's hold, iron collars biting into flesh, air thick with sweat and rot. The journey to port could take weeks. Many died before ever reaching land. Those who survived faced the cold machinery of colonial justice. Trials were swift, sentences brutal. In London, Boston, Kingston, and Nassau, special admiralty courts processed pirates by the dozens. Few had lawyers. Evidence came from their captors, or from their own confessions, often extracted by fear or false promises. Public hangings became spectacle. Crowds gathered at Execution Dock in Wapping, London, where pirates were hanged at low tide. The noose tightened. The condemned kicked as the river rose slowly around their feet. The body was left hanging until 3 tides had washed over it, a grim reminder of the sea's claim. Sometimes their corpses were coated in tar and displayed in iron cages at harbor entrances, a practice called gibbeting. The wind turned them slowly, creaking in the sun. Birds pecked the remains. Mothers covered their children's eyes as ships passed beneath the grisly totems. And Bonnie and Mary Red were tried in 1720. Pregnant at the time, both pleaded their bellies, a common plea that delayed execution until after childbirth. Mary died in prison, and vanished from the record. Some say her father's wealth secured her release, and she lived quietly thereafter. For most, there was no escape. The pirate dream ended in hemp and silence. Even before the noose, pirates faced daily torment. Life aboard ship was a long negotiation with misery. The skin cracked from salt, hair matted with grease. Parasites were constant, lice, fleas, and worms. In the tropics, sores never healed. Food shortages gnawed at morale. When supplies dwindled, they might turn cannibal. One recorded instance: the widow crew of Captain Black Sam Bellamy perished in a storm off Cape Cod in 1717. Only 2 survived from more than 100. The sea buried their treasure and their bones alike. The fear of naval pursuit haunted them. At night, lanterns were dimmed, voices hushed. A wrong silhouette on the horizon could mean doom. Some ships carried false flags to hide their identity, flying Spanish, French, or even British colors until the last moment. Deception was survival. But when the ruse failed, death came in cannon fire. Those too sick or weak to work were cast ashore, sometimes left on barren sandbanks with a pistol, a bottle of water, and the endless roar of the tide. Some tried to crawl inland. Others sat, staring at the horizon until hunger took them. The loneliness of the sea broke many minds. Men spoke to ghosts, claimed to see lights under the waves, swore they heard the sea whisper their names. The boundary between man and madness was as thin as the line between horizon and sky. The most enduring myth is that of buried treasure, a chest of gold marked by an X. Yet no historical evidence supports the idea that pirates buried their loot. They spent it as fast as they could, on drink, clothes, weapons, or pleasure. A few, like Captain Kidd, may have hidden small caches, but most wealth was short-lived. The treasure map, beloved of later fiction, was born not from fact but from imagination, first appearing in Robert Louis Stevenson's Treasure Island in 1883. The real pirates left no maps, no riddles, no buried legends, only broken ships, bones in shallow graves, and stories whispered across ports. Their true treasure was survival. Another day above water, another meal, another chance to feel wind in their face. And even that, most could not afford for long. The candle burns low, the waves roll steady. You can almost hear the soft groan of rope against mast. Yet there is more to see. The strange order within chaos, the legacy left behind. Imagine, listener, the deck at dusk, the horizon glowing amber, the sea calm for once. A dozen men sit in a circle, sharing a small cask of rum, their laughter thin and hollow. Beneath the camaraderie lies a silent truth. Few among them will see another year. The pirate brotherhood was built on necessity, not trust. Each man depended on the others for his life. Yet suspicion never slept. A whispered insult, an uneven share of loot, or a hidden coin pouch could spark deadly conflict. They swore oaths over pistols and blades, promising loyalty until death, but loyalty at sea was fragile as a spider's web. Still, this strange fellowship was all they had. They had turned their backs on governments, kings, and nations. They belonged only to the ocean. Each pirate ship was its own floating world, a republic of criminals bound by survival. Men from different lands, speaking fragments of many tongues, united by hunger, greed, and rage against a world that had abandoned them. When they drank, they sang. Old sea shanties rose into the wind. Rough voices cracked by salt and smoke, the rhythm of oars or ropes marking the beat. They sang of lost homes, of lovers left behind, of gold glimmering at the bottom of the sea. The songs were their only prayers. Every plank of a pirate ship bore the marks of repair, the scars of battle. Unlike naval vessels, pirates sailed captured ships, often smaller, faster sloops or schooners, built for agility rather than brute strength. Their hulls were patched with stolen wood, their cannons mismatched from different nations' designs. The decks were narrow, low-ceilinged, always damp. The smell of tar mixed with salt and decay. Powder kegs were stored beside barrels of rum. One spark could end them all. Sails were repaired with coarse thread by candlelight. The ropes, hempen lines as thick as an arm, were their lifelines. A single cut in a storm could doom the ship. Navigation was guesswork. Few pirates possessed charts or proper instruments. They relied on instinct, the stars, and stories passed between sailors. A misjudged current could send them hundreds of miles astray. Below deck, hammocks swung above barrels. The crew slept shoulder to shoulder, with rats scurrying over their feet. The stench of sweat and bilge water clung to every surface. When storms struck, the hold flooded, and the men bailed for hours to keep from sinking. Sometimes a carpenter, prized among any crew, patched holes with nothing but nails, pitch, and faith. The ship was both weapon and coffin, carrying its own death upon the tide. Rum was both comfort and curse. It dulled pain, masked hunger, and turned fear into courage, or into rage. Each man received a daily ration, often mixed with water to make grog. It numbed the senses, blurred reality, and fueled brawls that left decks smeared with blood. Yet without it, morale collapsed. Rum was the pirates' only medicine for despair. It silenced the memories of what they had become. Thieves, killers, ghosts of the sea. There were moments of strange joy. After a successful raid, they feasted. Roasted meat, stolen fruit, barrels of wine, women, and song. They danced barefoot on the deck, knives glinting in torchlight. For one night, the world belonged to them. But morning always came. Hangovers, disease, quarrels, regret. The laughter died quickly, replaced by the groaning of timbers and the endless slap of waves. The sea always took back its due. Some went mad. They whispered to the ocean as if it listened. They swore they saw ghost ships at night, phantom sails gliding through fog, calling their names. A few leapt overboard, believing they could walk home across the waves. Rum blurred the line between dream and death, until no one could tell which was which. Perhaps no symbol in history has stirred such fear as the Jolly Roger, a black flag marked with skull and crossbones. It was not uniform. Each captain designed his own. Some painted skeletons holding hourglasses, reminding victims their time was short. Others showed bleeding hearts, swords, or full skeletons dancing. When a pirate raised the black flag, it meant mercy if the enemy surrendered quickly, and death if they resisted. Sometimes they hoisted a red flag instead, the bloody banner, signifying no quarter. The flag's power was psychological. Merchants often surrendered at the first sight, hoping to save their lives. The pirates' goal was not slaughter but compliance. Fewer battles meant fewer wounds and more profit. But behind the flag's symbolism lay a chilling truth. It was the banner of men who had no home, no law, no God. A pirate ship flying the black flag declared war on the world itself. Raising it was an act of defiance and despair. a statement that they were already dead, and only the sea would decide when their bodies would follow. Each crew followed its own articles, a code carved out of necessity. Historical records show examples, such as those of Bartholomew Roberts and George Lowther. They read like constitutions of doomed republics. Every man has an equal vote in affairs of the moment. Loot to be divided by shares. The captain 2, the quartermaster 1.5, all others 1. No striking another aboard ship. Quarrels to be settled on shore, pistol and cutlass. No gambling with cards or dice for money. Lights out at 8. He who smokes below deck, punished by flogging. It was rough justice, but it worked. The code gave structure to chaos, order to rebellion. On these ships, men who had been slaves, peasants, or pressed sailors could stand as equals. And yet, equality did not bring peace. The code could not protect them from hunger, disease, or betrayal. Democracy at sea was a fragile thing, forever one storm away from mutiny. The fire crackles low in your imagination now. Outside, you can almost hear rain on the waves, a soft hiss like distant whispers of the dead. The story, though long and dark, is not yet finished. There came times when even pirates, who lived by rebellion, rebelled against themselves. Mutiny was the ultimate breakdown of trust, the moment when hunger, greed, or fear boiled into violence. A ship adrift in the doldrums, no wind, no food, was a breeding ground for madness. The captain's authority, once respected, could crumble overnight. If men whispered that he hoarded rum, or steered them into danger for his own pride, they would gather in the night with knives drawn. Mutiny began in silence. A nod, a shared glance, a pistol hidden beneath a coat. The air grew thick with suspicion. Then one dawn, the deck erupted in chaos. Steel met flesh. The captain's voice, once booming across the waves, was drowned by screams. Sometimes the mutineers spared him, marooning him on a barren shore with a compass and a flask. Sometimes they did not. The sea kept their secrets. But mutiny carried its own curse. A crew that turned once could turn again. The ship that betrayed its master soon betrayed itself. Without unity, it drifted. A ghost vessel, its men starving, each fearing the knife at his back. The sea demanded obedience, even from outlaws. Those who defied it too long vanished beneath it. When the Caribbean grew too dangerous, many pirates fled east, toward the Indian Ocean. The coasts of Madagascar, the Red Sea, and the islands near India offered new hunting grounds. Rich Mogul ships, Arab dhows, and East India Company vessels heavy with silver and silk. Here too the pattern repeated: violence, disease, and betrayal. Pirates built crude settlements along Madagascar's shores. They bartered with local tribes, traded for cattle, ivory, or wives, and dreamed of kingdoms. Some even spoke of founding Libertalia, a utopian republic of freedom and equality. But no such place ever truly existed. The dream dissolved in quarrels and bloodshed. Many of these pirates were aging men, their bodies scarred and weary. Their ships were rotting, their loot spent. The tropical air thickened their lungs. Mosquitoes drained their strength. The fever took them in droves, leaving only graves marked by driftwood crosses. Those who tried to return west found no welcome. The navies had closed their ports. The gallows waited. Their golden age was gone. As piracy grew intolerable, the great empires turned their full wrath upon it. Britain, Spain, France, and the Netherlands all dispatched fleets to cleanse the seas. No longer distracted by continental wars, they now united against a common enemy. The pirate hunters, professional captains like Jonathan Barnett, Benjamin Hornigold, and Woodes Rogers, hunted with precision. Once pirates themselves, they knew every hiding place, every trick. The British Admiralty issued new laws in 1700. Piracy was now punishable by death anywhere in the empire, no jury of peers required. Trials were swift, executions public. Naval patrols intercepted pirate ships before they could strike. Heavy frigates chased down the nimble sloops, and when captured, the pirates' flags were torn, their cannons spiked, Their ships burned to the waterline. Villages that had once harbored them now betrayed them. Colonial governors who once took bribes now collected bounties. One by one, the pirate havens fell silent. The age that had begun with desperate freedom ended in iron and fire. When the last true pirates swung from the noose, something strange began to happen. The world that had condemned them began to mythologize them. Writers, storytellers, and playwrights reshaped their savagery into adventure. By the 18th and 19th centuries, Europe's drawing rooms thrilled to romantic tales. Brave outlaws, gallant captains, and hidden treasure. The pirate's flag, once a mark of terror, became a symbol of freedom. But the truth remained buried beneath myth. The real pirate's life was not one of adventure but exhaustion, of blood, salt, hunger, and despair. Most were not noble rebels, but desperate men and women clawing for survival. The sound of their world was not music but coughing, creaking timber, and the crash of waves. The smell was not perfume and rum, but smoke, sweat, and rot. The ocean gave nothing freely. Yet the legends endure because they touch something deep, the yearning for freedom, even in defiance of death. The real pirates found that freedom briefly, but it destroyed them. You can almost hear it now, can't you? The sea rolling in, calm again after centuries. The sails long rotted, the gold long gone. Only the whispers remain, voices lost beneath the waves. There was no mercy for pain at sea. The surgeon aboard most pirate ships was rarely trained, often a failed barber or a man who had once cut timber more than flesh. His tools were crude. A saw, a knife, a cauterizing iron, a bottle of rum. When a man's leg was shattered by musket fire, he was laid on the deck, held down by his mates. The surgeon sawed through flesh and bone as he screamed. No anesthesia, no clean instruments, only the stench of blood and smoke. The wound was sealed with fire, and a dirty rag tied around the stump. If infection came, which it often did, he died within days. Teeth rotted easily, and with no dentistry. Men pried them out themselves using knives or nails. Eyes infected with salt or powder burns were rinsed with vinegar. Fever was treated with rum. Wounds with seawater. Many pirates bore scars that told their life story. Burns, missing fingers, broken noses, old bullet holes sealed with crude stitches. They lived with constant agony, but there was no time for rest. The sea did not stop because one man hurt. The lucky ones died quickly. The rest drifted between pain and madness. Sailors, especially pirates, were deeply superstitious. In a world ruled by wind and chance, they searched for meaning in signs and omens. Black cat aboard was bad luck. Whistling on deck could whistle up a storm. Killing an albatross was a sin against nature itself. Many carried charms, bones, coins, bits of rope, believing they could appease the sea's anger. They feared women aboard ships, saying they brought misfortune. Yet some ships had female captains, and those vessels often fared no worse than others, proving that fear, not truth, shaped the myth. When storms raged, pirates prayed in a jumble of faiths. Christian psalms, African chants, island rituals. The sea was a god to them, vast and merciless. They offered coins to the waves when a comrade died, whispering his name as the body slipped beneath the surface. They said that if you listen close at night, the dead sailors speak in the sound of the surf, 1,000 voices rolling together, forever wandering. In the early 1700s, the Caribbean was both paradise and hell. Warm winds carried the scent of sugarcane, but beneath its beauty was endless violence. Plantations ran on enslaved labor, European powers fought for islands, and ships crowded with goods sailed through narrow channels. Perfect prey for pirates. The islands became stages of empire and greed. Jamaica, ruled by the British, filled with rum, slaves, and sugar. Cuba, Spanish and fortified, a guarded treasure route. Hispaniola, divided between France and Spain, a frontier of trade and smuggling. The Bahamas, scattered and shallow, a pirate's haven of coral and reef. Every coastline had seen wrecks. Every harbor had whispered of plunder. But with wealth came death. The tropical heat spoiled supplies. and disease struck down sailors faster than gunfire. Yellow fever, malaria, smallpox, all thrived in the same ports that promised profit. For the pirates, it was a world of both temptation and doom. They fed on the riches of empires, yet they were also its victims, devoured by the very trade they plundered. Their names faded into salt and sand. Only the sea remembers them. At night, when the wind calmed, the sea made its own kind of music. The hull creaked like a heartbeat. The sails flapped and sighed. The ropes hummed softly, and the waves whispered against the planks. The pirates, exhausted from days of toil, would lie in their hammocks and listen, eyes open to the black ceiling above, breath slow and ragged. Sometimes one would hum a tune, a half-forgotten song from home. Another would join, then another, until the dark was filled with voices, rough, broken, and haunting. Music was their only comfort. Drums made from barrels, fiddles traded or stolen, even spoons tapped against mugs. It was crude, but it kept despair away for a while. Some sang shanties of revenge, against cruel captains, against kings. Others sang of love or of death, and when storms hit, they sang louder, as if their voices could drown the thunder. For them, the sea was both grave and cradle. Every sound, every silence carried a ghost. By the mid-18th century, piracy had withered under the might of empire. The Royal Navy ruled the seas. Trade routes were guarded, and new laws made piracy a memory. A few remnants lingered, small-time raiders off Africa or the South China Sea, but the grand days of the Caribbean corsairs were gone. Those who survived faded into poverty, hiding under false names. Some became fishermen, others beggars. A handful turned informers for the crown, betraying their old crewmates for gold. The sea forgot their names, but their stories refused to die. Books, plays, and songs kept them alive. In taverns and later in theaters, people retold their deeds with laughter and awe. The cruel, stinking truth turned into poetry. But the ghosts of the real men, sunburned, starving, broken, lingered in the roar of the tide. The legends were clean. The truth was filthy. The air is quiet now. Imagine the last flicker of a lantern aboard a ship adrift. The waves calm, the sails torn. Somewhere out there a bell tolls once, twice, then fades. Every coin a pirate touched carried a story of blood. The Spanish doubloons, the English guineas, the silver pieces of 8. They were treasures ripped from the hands of merchants, soldiers, and slaves. When a ship was taken, the loot was divided on deck under the eye of the quartermaster. Each man got his share according to rank, the captain and officers the most, the wounded a little extra, the common sailor enough to drink himself senseless. Yet gold never lasted. It slipped through fingers faster than seawater. They gambled it away, drank it away, or lost it in the next storm. Many buried their coins on small islands, believing they could return. Few ever did. The sea took most of them before they could reclaim their treasure. For all their greed, pirates rarely grew rich. Their lives were too short, their luck too fragile. A chest of gold might glimmer for a night, then sink forever beneath the waves. So the price of plunder was not measured in coins, but in bones left on forgotten shores. Though history remembers piracy as a man's world, the sea had its women too. Fierce, cunning, and unyielding. And Bonnie and Mary Red sailed under the Jolly Roger alongside men, dressed in coats and breeches, their pistols ready. When captured in 1720, they fought until the deck ran red, and spat at her captain Jack Rackham, saying, "If you'd fought like a man, you needn't be hanged like a dog." There were others, lesser known. Wives who smuggled messages, tavern keepers who supplied stolen goods, women who disguised themselves to escape poverty or punishment. But for most women who crossed paths with pirates, life was cruel. Many were taken captive, traded, or abandoned on distant islands. The sea, indifferent and cold, held no mercy for them either. Still, the stories of Anne and Mary echo through the centuries, proof that even in the darkest corners of the ocean, women carved their place with blade and will. When the noose came, it came quickly. Captured pirates were rarely given fair trials. In places like Port Royal, Jamaica, or London's execution dock, the proceedings were swift and final. The accused stood in tattered clothes before judges who had already decided their fate. Witnesses, often merchants or soldiers, told tales of raids and killings. The pirates stood silent, some laughing, others praying. Sentences were always the same: death by hanging. In London, the condemned were paraded through the streets in carts, jeered at by crowds. At the dockside gallows, they were given one last chance to speak. Some cursed the crown. Others begged forgiveness. A few sang sea shanties until the rope tightened around their throats. Their bodies were left to hang over the river, tarred and blackened, as a warning to others. Birds pecked their faces. The tide lapped at their feet. The law wanted fear to travel faster than the wind, and it did. For every pirate hanged, 100 others trembled at the thought of the rope. For a few short years, paradise belonged to thieves. In the early 1700s, the island of New Providence in the Bahamas became a pirate stronghold, a self-declared republic where no king ruled and no law bound them. Ships filled the harbor, black flags snapping in the breeze. Men like Benjamin Hornigold, Charles Vane, and Blackbeard walked freely among the streets, drinking, trading, and plotting. They elected their own council, decided raids by vote, and shared spoils equally. It was a fragile dream, a world without kings, where only the sea decided fate. But the dream did not last. Britain sent Woodes Rogers as governor in 1718 to crush the rebellion. He offered pardons to those who surrendered and death to those who refused. Some accepted and retired. Others fought and died. By 1720, Nassau's republic was no more. Its taverns burned, its flags torn down, its freedom swallowed by empire once again. For a brief moment, the pirates had tasted liberty. And like rum on the tongue, it burned and vanished. The smell aboard a pirate ship could sicken even the bravest man. Salt, sweat, rot, tar, gunpowder, and beneath it all, the sour stench of sickness. The close air below deck never changed. It clung to every surface. Rats scurried through the food stores. Fleas and lice crawled in beards and hair. When disease struck, it spread fast. Scurvy bloated their gums and turned their skin yellow. Dysentery left them weak and shivering. Fever made them hallucinate, seeing faces in the waves, hearing voices in the wind. The dead were wrapped in sailcloth, weighted with stones, and slid into the sea. The living watched in silence as the ocean swallowed another of their own. The next day they went back to work. The wind still blew. The ship still moved. And life, such as it was, continued. The wind howls low now. A long sigh through the rigging, a whisper of ghosts in the dark. Somewhere far below, the bones of the lost stir in the sand, dreaming of sunlight they will never see. When two ships met on the open sea, silence lasted only a moment, the brief calm before the storm of war. Then came the thunder. Cannon fire tore through the air, shaking the deck beneath bare feet. Wood splintered, ropes snapped, and men screamed as shrapnel ripped through their flesh. The air filled with choking smoke, the acrid taste of gunpowder and burning tar. Pirates fought with ferocity born of desperation. They had no uniform, no order, only the will to survive. Pistols fired at arm's length. Cutlasses clanged in close quarters. The cries of dying men were drowned by the roar of the sea and cannon. Victory brought cheers and plunder. Defeat brought chains or death. Many who fought never saw the next sunrise. Their blood stained the deck, washed clean only by rain. There were no heroes here, only survivors for a while. A pirate ship was both home and cage. Every man aboard was bound to it, its smell, its sound, its relentless motion. Hammocks hung close together, swinging in rhythm with the sea. Food was meager. Salted meat crawling with maggots, biscuits hard as stone, and barrels of stale water. There was little privacy. Every argument, every cough, every whispered curse echoed in the wooden walls. The captain's word ruled, but mutiny was always a breath away. Work never ceased. Sails needed trimming, guns cleaning, the deck scrubbing. A moment's neglect could mean death. A loose rope, a cracked mast, a hole below the waterline. The ship was alive in its way, groaning, creaking, breathing with every wave. The men spoke to it as if it were a beast, coaxing it to carry them safely through the next storm. But it was never truly safe. Every plank was one wave away from the deep. Pirates knew fear well, and they used it as a weapon. When they captured ships, they demanded surrender quickly, and when resistance came, punishment was merciless. Captains who defied them were beaten or killed. Prisoners were hung by their wrists, flogged, or thrown overboard. Sometimes men were marooned, left on deserted islands with only a bottle of water and a pistol. It was said that the sea claimed them in less than a week. The cruelty was not always for pleasure. It was for control. A pirate crew lived on terror's edge. If they showed weakness, rebellion might rise among their own ranks, so they ruled by fear. And yet, in strange irony, pirates often spared those who yielded. They valued skill. Carpenters, surgeons, navigators. Even former enemies could become brothers if they proved their worth. It was a brutal world, yes, but it followed its own dark logic. They were sinners, everyone, thieves, killers, deserters. Yet even pirates feared God. On quiet nights, some prayed softly to the stars. Others made crude crosses from rope or wood, muttering half-remembered psalms. Many carried tiny charms, saints, coins, or bits of bone believed to ward off evil. But faith aboard a pirate ship was twisted. Some mocked religion, saying no heaven could want them. Others clung to it desperately, begging forgiveness between battles. When death came, and it came often, a few cried out for mercy. The rest simply stared at the horizon, their lips moving without sound. The sea was their church, the wind their choir, the storm their judgment. And when their bodies sank beneath the waves, they prayed the sea would keep their souls from the devil's grasp. Even chaos had rules. Before every voyage, the crew gathered on deck to agree upon the articles of the ship, the pirate code. Each man signed his name or made his mark and swore to obey. The code decided everything: how treasure was divided, how injuries were compensated, when fighting was allowed, what punishments awaited thieves or deserters. Stealing from a comrade meant death or marooning. Cowardice in battle could cost a man his share. Disobedience brought the lash. But the code also promised fairness. Captains were elected, not born to power. Shares of loot were nearly equal. Every man had a voice, something rare in the age of kings. To the world, pirates were monsters. To each other they were a brotherhood, brutal, yes, but bound by their own sense of justice. Their law floated on the waves, as fragile and fierce as their lives. The lantern burns low now, its flame trembling in the salt wind. The night deepens, and the ocean whispers secrets older than any man. Somewhere beyond the dark horizon, another ship sails, silent, empty, forgotten. When the black flag rose, hearts froze. The Jolly Roger, a skull and crossbones on a black field, was the most feared sight on the sea. But not all pirate flags were alike. Some bore hourglasses, warning that time was running out. Others showed skeletons stabbing hearts or holding spears, grim symbols of death's certainty. Each captain designed his own, a declaration of his reign. Blackbeard's flag showed a skeleton toasting the devil while spearing a bleeding heart. Calico Jack Rackham favored the simple crossed swords. Every banner had one purpose: to strike terror before a shot was fired. Raising the black flag was a demand: surrender or die. If a merchant ship refused, the pirates hoisted the red flag. No mercy, no quarter. That crimson cloth meant blood would follow. The flags were not just symbols. They were weapons of the mind. They turned courage to fear and fear to surrender before a cannon ever roared. And long after those flags rotted away, their shadow still flies in the imagination, a warning that death once had a face on the sea. History remembers the names that burned brightest, though their lives were short and savage. Edward Teach, Blackbeard, His beard, braided and lit with fuses during battle, made him look like a demon risen from the deep. He ruled the Atlantic coast with terror until 1718, when the British Navy cornered him at Ocracoke. He was shot and stabbed over 20 times before he fell, and even then, his body swam 3 laps around the ship before sinking. Bartholomew Roberts, Black Bart, a Welshman of surprising discipline. He banned gambling and drunkenness among his crew. He captured over 400 ships in just 3 years before being killed by a cannonball in 1722. Charles Vane, Calico Jack, Henry Avery, Stede Bonnet, all men whose greed and defiance carved their names into history's rough wood. They lived fast, died brutally, and left behind only whispers and myths. The ocean remembers their screams, but the world remembers their courage. Yet courage without mercy is still cruelty. The rhythm of pirate life was steady, though filled with dread. At dawn, the boatswain's whistle roused the crew. The men scrubbed the deck, checked the rigging, and loaded the guns. Breakfast was simple: hardtack and salted meat, washed down with water or grog. Then came practice: aiming cannons, climbing masts, sharpening blades. The ship had to be battle-ready at all times. Even on calm days they feared ambush. Midday brought heat so fierce the deck burned bare feet. Men worked shirtless, sweat shining on their backs, the sun blistering their skin. Shade was a dream. At sunset, some smoked pipes or told stories of battles, of home, of ghosts at sea. The sound of dice rattled, curses flew, and laughter echoed between the waves. Night was their only peace, if peace could be found in the dark. The sea rocked them to sleep, the stars above seemed close enough to touch, and yet, beneath that beauty, the stench of salt, tar, and death never left. For a pirate, even rest was restless. The ocean keeps its dead well hidden. Thousands of ships vanished during the age of piracy. Storms tore them apart. Reefs shredded their hulls. Cannon fire split them open, sending men and treasure alike to the bottom. Divers have found some silent tombs frozen in time. Cannons still pointing, muskets still rusting beside bones. Coins scattered like fallen stars across the seabed. Among the most sought-after wrecks is the Witta Galley, a slave ship captured by pirate Sam Bellamy in 1717. It sank off Cape Cod in a storm, carrying treasure and over 100 souls. It lay lost for more than 2 centuries before being found in 1984, its story finally resurfacing from the dark. Each wreck tells of hubris, greed, and the sea's unending hunger. The pirates thought they ruled the waves, but in truth they were always its servants. The ocean took what it wanted, and it wanted them all. Rum was their comfort and their curse. Every pirate ship carried barrels of it, strong, dark, and burning as it went down. It dulled pain, drowned fear, and kept men loyal. It was also poison. Too much rum made men reckless, turned friends to enemies, and blurred the line between laughter and murder. A drunken crew could not fight or steer through storms. But sobriety was rare. The sea was too cruel to face sober for long. The mixture of rum, water, and sugar, called grog, became their daily drink. It stank, it soured, but it kept thirst at bay. Some captains rationed it carefully. Others drank until they saw ghosts in the waves. The strongest always said, "Better to die drunk in freedom than sober in chains." And many did. Faces turned to the sky, rum still warm on their tongues. The sea hums now, low and endless, like a lullaby for the damned. The stars blink over the black water, and the wind whispers names long forgotten. Every sound carries memory, of cannon fire, of laughter, of the crack of rope. Every tale of pirates seems to end with buried gold. Maps marked with X's, hidden islands, secret coves. Stories told in taverns and whispered by firelight. But the truth is far duller and far darker. Most pirates never buried treasure at all. Gold was too tempting to hoard. It was spent quickly in drink, gambling, and fleeting pleasures. What few hoards existed were lost when their owners met the gallows or the sea. The myth began long after the Golden Age ended, spun by storytellers and sailors who dreamed of fortunes under the sand. Perhaps one or two did bury their loot, but storms, tides, and time erased the markers. The sea devours secrets faster than men can draw them. Still the image remains. A tattered map, ink fading, the promise of something just out of reach. Maybe that's what draws us to pirates even now. Not the gold they found, but the freedom they chased and the madness it cost them. Their real treasure was always the illusion of escape. Before compasses were common and charts reliable, the sea itself was a living mystery. Many pirates were poor navigators, learning by instinct and rumor more than skill. They followed stars and currents, reading the color of the water and the flight of seabirds. A single misjudgment could lead them into reefs or dead calms where the ship drifted for days without wind. Food ran out. Water turned foul. Men prayed for storms they once feared. To sail beyond known waters was to court death. Sailors whispered that monsters lived there. Serpents longer than ships, ghosts that lured men to the deep, islands that vanished at dawn. Even hardened pirates feared those empty horizons. For all their bravado, they were still men in wooden shells upon a merciless sea, trusting their lives to a sky full of indifferent stars. And when clouds covered those stars, even the bravest captain trembled. Piracy thrived because empire thrived, and empire was built on slavery. Many pirate ships captured vessels loaded with enslaved Africans, bound for the plantations of the Americas. Sometimes the pirates freed them, offering a place among the crew. Other times they sold them again for profit, no better than the merchants they robbed. It is an uncomfortable truth, that even among outlaws who spoke of freedom, cruelty still lived. Some enslaved men became pirates themselves, finding in that life a grim kind of liberty. Names like Black Caesar, a former African chieftain turned pirate under Blackbeard, tell of such transformations. Yet freedom bought with violence remained fragile, haunted by what had been done to gain it. The sea, it seemed, washed away many sins, but not all. In every empire's shadow, pirates were both rebels and reflections. They fought the kings who enslaved them, yet carried those same chains in their hearts. Imagine standing on a deck slick with blood and rain, the air thick with smoke, your ears ringing from cannon fire. That was the scent of battle, salt, sulfur, sweat, and terror. Gunpowder clung to skin and clothes for days. The black residue smeared their faces like war paint. After the fight, they cleaned the cannons and patched the holes with trembling hands, knowing another skirmish might come before dawn. The sound of a musket misfire could spell death. The recoil bruised shoulders. Sparks burned fingers. And when the powder ran low, the crew scavenged or stole more. For a ship without guns was a carcass waiting for vultures. When peace settled, the smell of powder lingered, a ghost that clung to the planks, reminding them that safety was only ever an illusion. They lived always one spark away from death. We often picture pirates beneath the blazing sun, but many sailed far north, into bitter winds and freezing storms. The Atlantic in winter was a monster. Waves rose higher than masts, ice formed on ropes, and cold turned fingers numb until they cracked and bled. Men huddled in thin coats, teeth chattering, salt crusted in their beards. The sea spray froze midair, turning decks into glass. Every movement risked a fall, and in those waters a man who went overboard never came back. The cold was an enemy more patient than the navy, more certain than any bullet, crept into bones and hearts alike. Many pirates longed for the warmth of the Caribbean, but trade routes stretched north and gold lured them onward. Some ships disappeared into fog and were never seen again, swallowed not by cannon fire, but by winter's silence. In those frozen graves, the legend of adventure dies. The waves tonight sound softer, a rhythm of calm between storms. Picture the ship now, rocking gently, the stars veiled by thin mist. The men sleep uneasily, dreaming of home they'll never see again. The sea hums low, steady, endless. They called it dancing the hempen jig. When a pirate was finally captured, his trial was swift and his sentence certain. No mercy for men who defied the crown. In the grey dawn, The townsfolk gathered near the harbor gallows. Children perched on shoulders, vendors sold bread and beer. It was an event, a warning. The condemned stood in torn clothes, the salt wind tangling his hair. Some spat curses, some prayed, others smiled, defiant to the end. The rope creaked. A drum beat. Silence. Then the drop. The sea, not the land, was their true grave, but the gallows claimed their last breath. Afterward, the bodies were left hanging for days, blackened by the sun, a warning to any who dreamed of freedom on the waves. The birds came first. Then the tide took what was left. And still the stories of their courage lived on. Not all pirates met the rope. Some vanished at sea, swallowed by storms, cannon fire, or madness. When death came on the water, burials were brief. The body was sewn into sailcloth with a cannonball at its feet. A final prayer, a hush, a splash, and the ocean claimed another. They said the sea judged each man. Some ships were cursed to sail forever, crewed by the dead who never found rest. The Flying Dutchman, they called it. A ghost ship glowing in lightning storms, bringing doom to any who saw it. Sailors swore they heard laughter carried on the wind, and lanterns swaying in the fog long after the storm had passed. Maybe it was just the sea playing tricks. Or maybe some spirits truly refused to sink. Because freedom, once tasted, does not let go, even in death. History remembers captains, Blackbeard, Calico Jack, and Bonnie, but the hundreds who sailed beneath them vanished into silence. The nameless sailors, cooks, and gunners, their bones rest in nameless graves at the bottom of the sea. No one wrote their stories, yet they lived the same hunger, the same storms, the same dreams. They were the heartbeat of every pirate ship, the rough laughter, the hoarse songs, the cracked hands that hauled ropes through lightning and rain. In old logbooks, their presence lingers as smudged ink and initials. Lost overboard, killed in action, deserted. The sea keeps their names better than we ever did. And when you listen closely to the waves, sometimes it sounds like they're still speaking, a chorus of forgotten souls, calling from below. Centuries passed, and pirates turned from criminals into legends. Books, plays, and films remade them. Brave, charming rogues instead of desperate outlaws. Their filth became flair. Their greed became glory. Why do we do this? Perhaps because we envy what they pretended to have. Freedom without consequence, adventure without fear. But the real pirate's life was hunger, disease, betrayal, and pain. They were not heroes. They were men and women who ran from poverty and found death waiting at sea. Still we love them, because the myth is warmer than the truth. It lets us dream of breaking chains, of choosing our own fate, even if it means sailing straight into a storm. The sea, after all, forgives all lies. By the mid-18th century, the pirate flags began to vanish. Empires grew stronger. Their navies swarmed the seas. Trade routes were guarded, coasts fortified, rewards offered for every pirate's head. One by one, the free ships were hunted down and burned. The ocean that once rang with cannon fire grew silent again. The last of the pirates disappeared, some into graves, others into new names and quiet lives on distant shores. But even as the sails faded, the stories did not. The sea remembers everything. And somewhere beneath the waves, a ship still drifts, its flag torn, its crew eternal, sailing between truth and legend. The age of piracy ended. But its echo never did. The pirate's world was never about gold or glory. It was about hunger, for life, for freedom, for a sky unruled by kings. They found it for a heartbeat, and lost it forever. But listen closely, and you'll still hear them. In the wind, in the waves, in every story we tell when the night is long and the sea is dark. Freedom was the word that lured them, whispered like a prayer between clenched teeth. No master, no law, no king. Only the horizon. But the ocean exacts a price. The moment a sailor turned pirate, he traded one chain for another. Hunger, disease, fear. Freedom at sea was never peace. It was a daily gamble with death. The storms were crueler than any captain. The waves broke ships like toys. Food rotted, water turned foul, tempers flared. and men who called each other brother fought like beasts for scraps. At night they stared at the stars and wondered, had they truly escaped or just found a grander prison without walls? Freedom, they learned, can taste like salt and blood. It seems strange, doesn't it, that the world's most feared criminals had rules. Every pirate ship carried its own code, often signed in blood or ink, a fragile pact of survival. No man stole from another. No cowardice in battle. Shares of plunder were divided with strict fairness. The quartermaster, not the captain, kept the crew in line. He guarded the loot, punished theft, and acted as judge. Even the captain could be voted out or killed if he betrayed the code. On land they were criminals. At sea they built their own kind of democracy. Rough, brutal, but fairer than many kingdoms. It was a strange mirror of the world that rejected them. A floating society, born from exile and desperation. And Bonnie and Mary Read. Two names that startled the world. Women aboard ships were seen as bad luck, but these two defied every curse. Disguised in men's clothes, they fought, drank, and cursed beside their crew. When captured, witnesses said they fought like wildcats. They weren't symbols of romance. They were survivors. Women who refused the fate society had written for them. When Mary fell ill in prison, she died quietly in her cell, and vanished from the records. Perhaps hanged, perhaps freed. History forgot the details, but their defiance endures. Two shadows standing tall against a world that said they could not. And in the dark corners of taverns, sailors still whisper their names like a blessing against fate. If a pirate feared anything more than the sea, it was capture. Execution was merciful compared to what awaited some. Torture was meant to set an example, to make rebellion smell like fear. The rack, the whip, the branding iron, the gibbet cage. These were the tools of royal justice. Pirates were often hung in iron cages by the shore, left for the tide to rise beneath them, gulls pecking at their flesh. In Port Royal and London, the crowds came to watch, cheer, to learn. A grim theater of empire. The sea that once felt endless suddenly became a trap. And every port, once a refuge, turned into a noose. It was then the pirates understood. Freedom has no mercy, and neither do kings. For all the tales of buried treasure, few pirates ever saw gold. The truth was far duller. Stolen sugar, tobacco, rum, cloth, or grain. Real treasure was rare, and when it came, it vanished fast. Spent on drink, women, or gambling in a night of madness. The myth of the buried chest came later, written by men who never smelled the sea. Pirates lived day to day, with little thought for tomorrow. What they truly buried was not gold. It was their pain, their failures, their hunger for something better. If they hid anything at all, it was the truth. And centuries later, we still dig for that, mistaking their ghosts for fortune. There are few sounds as terrible as a ship breaking in a storm. The masts scream, the sails shred like paper, and the sea turns black with rage. Men are thrown overboard like leaves in the wind. Some try to cling to planks, shouting prayers that no God hears. Pirates did not fear cannon fire as much as they feared nature. Storms ended whole crews, erased ships from existence without a trace. One moment laughter and song, the next silence and splintered wood. The ocean gives nothing back. For those who survived, the memory never left them. They dreamed of it, woke sweating, hearing phantom waves crashing in their ears. To live as a pirate was to live knowing that at any moment, the world beneath you could open and take you home. The Caribbean was dotted with secret harbors. Tortuga, New Providence, Madagascar, names that still sound like adventure. But these havens were closer to hell than paradise. The heat was suffocating, disease rampant, food scarce. Rats ruled the huts. Mosquitoes carried fever. Men drank themselves mad on cheap rum. The taverns reeked of sweat, gunpowder, and blood. And yet, these places were home, the only home pirates knew. A crooked kind of freedom, loud and fleeting. In the candlelight of those taverns, new plots were born. Ships repaired, alliances forged, and betrayals whispered over mugs of ale. Tomorrow they'd sail again, not for glory but for survival. They sang to drown the silence. Work songs called sea shanties, kept rhythm for hauling ropes or rowing through calm seas. The verses spoke of lost loves, home ports, and vengeance. Some songs were curses in disguise, others prayers to the sea itself. The music echoed over the waves at night, drifting like ghosts' voices. Even in death, their songs survived, reshaped by sailors, travelers, dreamers. They became the heartbeat of the ocean, passed from ship to ship, century to century. When you hear the creak of wood and the sigh of the tide, perhaps, just perhaps, you can still catch a verse of their song. A melody older than kings, and sadder than freedom. Imagine the sea stretching endlessly in all directions. No land, no sails, no hope. The sun burns down by day. The nights are colder than stone. Days turn to weeks, and the crew's minds begin to unravel. Men count waves, curse gods, or talk to the wind. Pirates were not always fighting or plundering. Most of their lives were spent waiting. Waiting for a ship to appear, for food to last, for the next storm to pass. Salt crusted their skin. The deck became their world. No grass, no trees, no solid ground. Even the bravest among them felt the creeping terror of endless water. Some jumped overboard, claiming they saw land in the mist, but there was nothing there. The ocean could break a man long before battle ever came. Bread turned to stone. Meat swam with maggots. Water stank like death. That was a pirate's diet. When supplies ran low, they boiled leather belts or chewed on ropes. Rats became delicacies. Some drank seawater and madness followed. Lips cracked, tongues swelled, minds broke. The lucky ships caught fish or raided merchant vessels for food. The unlucky ones watched their crewmates die one by one. Scurvy, the sailor's curse. Rotted gums loosened teeth and turned skin to sores. Men grew too weak to climb the rigging, too delirious to stand. Freedom came with a cruel hunger. It was never gold that haunted them. It was the memory of a full belly and clean water. There was no doctor at sea, only the surgeon, often a drunk or a failed barber. He carried knives, saws, rum, and a Bible. That was the pirate's medicine chest. When fever swept through the ship, hammocks became graves. Lice, fleas, and the stink of sweat filled the air. The surgeon cut away limbs blackened by infection, tied off arteries with rope, and poured rum into wounds. Men screamed, bit down on wood, and prayed. Some survived. Most did not. Amidst this horror, there was no pity, only the grim rhythm of the waves and the surgeon's blade. The sea did not wait for grief. The mind of a pirate was as weathered as his hands. Isolation. Sunday fear. Rum. It all gnawed at the edges. Some became violent, attacking friends over imagined slights. Others sat staring into the horizon for days, whispering to no one. Sailors believed the sea had voices, whispering at night through the boards, calling names. When too many days passed without land, even the sane began to listen. Superstition ruled their minds. A bird landing on the mast was a sign of death. Calm sea was a curse. They called it sea madness, a slow drowning of the mind, even when the body still breathed. And in their silence, they became part of the ocean's vast loneliness. Rum, the pirate's medicine, currency, and curse. It numbed the hunger, dulled the pain, and burned away fear. But it also broke discipline. Drunken brawls turned deadly. Knives flashed, friendships ended in blood. Rum flowed like water in the pirate havens, traded for everything from ammunition to women. By dawn, the survivors woke among corpses and broken bottles. Then they drank again. It was easier than remembering what they had become. The captains knew it. The quartermasters feared it. But without rum there would be mutiny. With rum there was madness. There was no winning, only surviving until the next drink. A pirate ship was not the grand vessel of legends. It was filth on water. The smell struck first. A choking mix of tar, gunpowder, rot, sweat, and waste. Men relieved themselves over the side. Sickness pooled in corners. Rats scurried through the dark. The decks were slick with grease and blood from battles and butchering animals. Clothes never dried. The hold stank of mold. The sea breeze offered brief mercy, but the stench always returned. No perfume of freedom, only the stinging reek of decay that clung to skin and soul alike. That was the real perfume of piracy. Even among outlaws, betrayal was never far. When a captain grew cruel, or luck turned bad, the crew whispered. Rumors spread. Blades were sharpened. Loyalties tested. Mutiny was swift. Often at dawn. Pistol shot. Shout. The captain dragged from his cabin and tossed to the sea. Democracy ended where fear began. Sometimes the mutineers succeeded. Sometimes they failed and paid with their necks. Either way, the sea always won. Because every act of defiance only proved what they already knew. Freedom without unity was just chaos adrift. And the waves, ever patient, swallowed them all the same. When most slept, the watchman stood under the moon, listening to the creak of the ropes and the endless sigh of the tide. The stars above were their only company. Ancient, cold, and indifferent. They thought of home. Of mothers, wives, or children they'd left behind. Of the choices that led them here. Sometimes they hummed old songs under their breath. Soft, broken melodies that the sea seemed to carry away. In those quiet hours, the bravest pirates felt something rare. Sorrow. The world saw them as monsters, but alone under the moon, they were just men. Small, tired, and lost in the endless dark. He was born Edward Teach, though some called him Thatch. No one knows where exactly he came from. Bristol perhaps, but by the early 1700s, he had become the nightmare of the Caribbean. They called him Blackbeard, and he built his legend deliberately. Before battle, he tied slow-burning fuses into his beard and hair, setting them alight. Smoke curled around his face, glowing in his eyes. Part man, part demon. Yet, behind the terror, he was strangely measured, ruling his crew not by cruelty, but by charisma. He took prizes efficiently, avoided unnecessary killing, and kept strict order aboard his ship, the Queen Anne's Revenge. His reign was short, barely 2 years, but the world would never forget him. In 1718, cornered off the coast of North Carolina, he fought his final battle against Royal Navy Lieutenant Robert Maynard. Blackbeard took 5 gunshots and 20 sword wounds before he fell. His head was severed and hung from the ship's bow, a grisly trophy. But even then, sailors swore they saw his body swim around the ship before sinking, as if defying death itself. John Rackham wore bright clothes and a feathered hat. He looked more like a theater actor than a pirate. They called him Calico Jack for his taste in fine, patterned fabrics. He wasn't known for great battles or vast fortunes, but for something rarer. His crew. Among them sailed Bonnie and Mary Red, the 2 women who would become legends. Together, they raided the Caribbean in the early 1720s, striking small ships, laughing through gunfire, and drinking in every port. But pride and drunkenness undid him. Captured off Jamaica in 1720, Rackham was hanged. And Bonnie's last words to him, according to legend, were cold as steel. If you had fought like a man, you need not be hanged like a dog. Not all pirates were born for blood. Some, like Bartholomew Roberts, were forced into it. Captured by pirates in 1719, he was offered a choice: join or die. He joined. Within weeks, his courage and cunning made him captain. Unlike many, Roberts despised drunkenness and disorder. He banned gambling, required cleanliness, and held regular prayers. He treated piracy like a grim business, not a game. In just 3 years, he captured over 400 ships, more than any other pirate in history. His end came in 1722, when a cannonball tore through his throat off the coast of Africa. His men, loyal to the last, wrapped his body in sailcloth and cast him into the sea before capture. The waves closed over him. Silent, final, merciful. Charles Vane was defiance incarnate. While others accepted royal pardons, he spat in the face of kings. He attacked British ships long after piracy had begun to fade. His fury unmatched. But arrogance destroyed him. His crew mutinied, tired of his recklessness. Vane drifted for years, shipless and alone, until fate cornered him on a storm-battered island. Captured, he was taken to Jamaica, where the noose waited. Witnesses said he faced death without flinching. His last words a curse. Vane's story ended in chains, but his spirit never bent. He became the symbol of pure rebellion, the man who refused surrender, even to the end. Born in Ireland, raised in the New World, and Bonnie had fire in her blood. She married a small-time sailor but soon ran off with Calico Jack Rackham, taking to the sea disguised as a man. When her identity was revealed, she didn't hide, she fought. Witnesses said she was fierce, fearless, and cruel when angered. She fought beside her crew, pistols blazing, even when others fled. When the ship was finally captured, only Anne and Mary Red stood their ground, fighting to the last breath. In prison, Anne's fate remains uncertain. Records say she pleaded her belly, claiming pregnancy to delay execution. Some believe she was later released. Others say she died quietly in the shadows. But her legend endures, proof that the ocean's fury knows no gender. Mary Read had fought as a man long before she became a pirate. She joined armies disguised in uniform, survived battlefields, and lived by her wits. When she met Bonnie and Calico Jack, she found a strange kind of kinship, a world where masks no longer mattered. But her strength could not outmatch the sea. Captured with the rest, she too claimed pregnancy and was spared execution, for a time. Prison fever claimed her, quietly and without glory. There was no crowd to watch, no songs to remember her, only silence. Yet in that silence, she became something far greater, a symbol of defiance in a world that wanted her to stay invisible. Captain William Kidd began not as a pirate, but as a privateer, a legal raider hired by the English crown to hunt others. But greed, misunderstanding, and political betrayal turned him into what he swore to fight. When he captured an Armenian ship, Quebec merchant, carrying treasure, the crown accused him of piracy. He returned to London to plead his case, and walked straight into a trap. Kidd was hanged in 1701. The rope broke on the first attempt, so they hanged him again. His body was left in chains by the River Thames for years. His legend gave birth to the greatest myth of all, buried treasure. They say his gold lies hidden still, somewhere along the coasts of the Caribbean or New England. But perhaps the real treasure is his warning, that even loyalty to kings can end on the gallows. They called him the Prince of Pirates, handsome, courteous, and strangely just. Samuel Bellamy treated captives well, spared lives, and gave rousing speeches about equality. He believed piracy was rebellion against the cruelty of the powerful. He fell in love with a girl named Maria Hallett in Massachusetts, swearing to return with enough fortune to marry her. But fate had other plans. In 1717, his ship, the Whydah Galley, sank in a storm off Cape Cod. Bellamy and most of his crew were swallowed by the waves. Centuries later, the wreck was found. Cannons, coins, and bones scattered across the seabed. And in every story told of him since, there lingers a quiet ache, of love lost to the sea. By the 1720s, the tide began to turn. For decades, pirates had thrived in the cracks between empires, the neglected waters of the Caribbean, the Indian Ocean, the coast of Africa. But kings and companies had grown tired of their losses. The Royal Navy expanded. Colonial governors armed their ports. The British East India Company, once complicit in trade with pirates, turned ruthless in suppressing them. One by one, pirate havens were burned. Ships that once flew the black flag now sank in flames or surrendered in fear. The oceans were no longer free. They were mapped, patrolled, and claimed. The golden age of piracy, from roughly 1650 to 1730, was dying. But its ghosts lingered, whispering of rebellion in every port where sailors still dreamed of freedom. The pirate stronghold of Nassau, in the Bahamas, was once a kingdom of thieves. From its ramshackle docks, hundreds of pirates sailed, feasting, fighting, and ruling the sea without law. For years, it was a place where fugitives became captains, and penniless sailors became kings. Then came Woodes Rogers, a former privateer appointed royal governor in 1718. His mission, to cleanse Nassau of piracy once and for all. He came not only with soldiers, but with something more cunning, pardons. "Accept the king's mercy," his proclamation read, "and your crimes will be forgiven." Hundreds accepted. Those who refused, like Charles Vane, were hunted down. By 1720, Nassau was no longer a pirate republic. It was a crown colony once more, its taverns silent, its gallows busy. The dream of a free brotherhood at sea had ended where it began, in betrayal and surrender. Pirates had always relied on speed and chaos. But the new naval fleets were larger, faster, better armed, and relentless. Royal ships patrolled the Caribbean, West Africa, and the Indian Ocean. When a pirate was spotted, pursuit was unending, days, even weeks of chase. The pirates' smaller vessels, their sails shredded and crews exhausted, rarely stood a chance. Captured pirates faced no trial by jury. Their verdict was predetermined: hanged at dawn, buried in shallow graves, or left swinging by the shore for the gulls. Fear replaced defiance. The seas that had once echoed with cannon fire and laughter now echoed only with the wind. Freedom had been crushed beneath the iron will of empire. Some pirates accepted the king's pardon, hoping for peace or at least a life spared. But mercy was fickle. Many who surrendered were later accused of new crimes, or hunted again under suspicion. The pardons, once seen as salvation, became traps. Pirates like Charles Vane mocked those who accepted them, calling them cowards who traded freedom for chains. But others, weary of hunger and blood, simply wanted to live. Some became fishermen or dockhands. Some vanished into the islands under false names. Others, restless and bitter, returned to the sea, and died there, hunted and forgotten. The pardon was not mercy. It was the empire's final trick, turning rebellion into submission. The pirate brotherhood, the idea that men could live as equals beyond the reach of kings, began to dissolve. Without ships, without havens, and without unity, they were easy prey. Mutiny grew. Fear replaced loyalty. Gold lost its meaning. Many captains betrayed their own men to save themselves. The last true pirate fleets, scattered across the Atlantic, were extinguished one by one. In 1726, the final mass execution took place in London. 37 pirates hanged at once. The crowd cheered. The age of rebellion had ended. But in every tavern, in every port city, sailors still whispered of a time when men ruled the waves, when no flag commanded them, and the horizon belonged to all. While the Caribbean burned, piracy survived elsewhere, in the Indian Ocean, off Madagascar, and around the Red Sea. These pirates preyed on ships from Arabia, India, and Europe, raiding the trade routes of silk, spices, and gold. Madagascar became a haven for exiles, a wild land of mangroves, fever, and freedom. Here, pirate kings built small settlements, trading with local chiefs and dreaming of new empires. But disease, isolation, and betrayal doomed them. By the mid-18th century, the island's pirate settlements were abandoned, their huts swallowed by vines, their ships rotted into the sand. Only legends remained, whispers of treasure, and of ships that vanished without a trace. By 1730, the black flag had all but disappeared. Yet something of its spirit endured. The seas were quieter, but the stories grew louder, told by sailors around fires, then by writers and dreamers. The pirates' defiance became romance. The gallows became glory. We forgot their hunger, their disease, their fear, and remembered only the laughter, the wind in their hair, and the cry of "No king." But behind every story of adventure lies the truth, that the sea takes everything, took their lives, their ships, their souls, and yet somehow it gave them immortality. The golden age was gone, but its echo still sings through the waves. When the last pirate was hanged, the real story should have ended. But it didn't. A strange thing happened. The worse their lives had been, the more glorious their legends became. Writers, long after the gallows had emptied, began to reshape the tale. They softened the cruelty, added charm, even a code of honor. By the late 18th century, piracy had been reborn, not in the oceans but in the imagination. The dirty, desperate men who had died nameless were now heroes in novels and plays. Their hunger became adventure. Their mutinies became freedom. And their crimes, simply quests for treasure. The sea, it seemed, forgave everything once the ink dried. One of the first to revive the pirate myth was Daniel Defoe, who had written Robinson Crusoe. In 1724, he published a general history of the pirates, a book filled with supposed first-hand accounts. Though much of it was fiction, it became the source from which all later pirate tales flowed. From Blackbeard to and Bonny, Defoe's words gave life and color to their ghosts, turning brutal sea robbers into charming rebels. The book was read across Europe, and for the first time pirates became characters, complex, even sympathetic. Defoe's pirates didn't just steal gold, they stole the world's imagination. In London and Paris, theater audiences loved sea dramas, stories of mutiny, hidden treasure, and noble captains who fought cruel tyrants. It was easier to admire a pirate when he was played by an actor under soft candlelight. The smell of sweat and gunpowder was gone, replaced by music and poetry. By the early 1800s, the pirate was no longer the poor sailor from the slums of Bristol or the docks of Nassau. He was a romantic outcast, misunderstood, free, and dangerous only to the wicked. Writers like Lord Byron added to this, making the pirate a symbol of rebellion against kings and empires. He was no longer a man of hunger and sores. He was a creature of passion and poetry. In 1883, Robert Louis Stevenson published Treasure Island. And with that, the pirate myth was sealed forever. The world now believed in talking parrots, buried chests, maps marked with X's, and wooden-legged captains with secret hearts. Stevenson's Long John Silver was everything a real pirate wasn't. Clever, witty, noble in spirit even when cruel. Children began to dream not of running away to sea, but of adventure, freedom, and gold glittering beneath palm trees. The truth, that most pirates died poor and diseased, without treasure or glory, was buried deeper than any chest. And yet the myth was beautiful, perhaps too beautiful to let die. No pirate ever buried gold. Not one has ever been proven to have hidden treasure on an island. Their loot was spent the moment it was won, on rum, food, shelter, and fleeting moments of joy. Most pirates never lived long enough to keep anything. Their true treasure was time, stolen days and nights of freedom, stolen from the world that enslaved them. They laughed when they shouldn't have. They sang when death waited just beyond the waves. And in that defiance, that short, burning flash of life, they became unforgettable. Perhaps that was their treasure all along. The Caribbean today hides its secrets beneath clear blue waters. Many pirate ships lie there still, shattered hulls resting in coral, bones turned to sand. Divers find rusted pistols, fragments of gold coins, the curved edges of cutlasses eaten by time. Each relic whispers a story, of men who lived for the horizon and died for it too. The sea has no memory of names, no mercy for those who sail her, but she keeps their echoes in every wave and storm. And if you listen, really listen, you can still hear them. Not roaring, not laughing, just the quiet creak of wood and the sigh of wind through torn sails. Long after the last pirate died, their code of brotherhood outlived them. It was a strange democracy, one where captains could be voted out, spoils were divided fairly, and no man was master of another. Centuries later, sailors, explorers, and even soldiers would adopt pieces of that spirit. In modern times, the idea of living beyond control, beyond government or greed, still fascinates us. It is the whisper that freedom can exist, even in chaos. It is the reminder that rules, when too cruel, are meant to be broken. That spirit, wild, flawed, and free, was the real legacy of the pirates. By the 1750s, the sea belonged again to empires. Trade flowed, warships ruled, and order returned. But the price of that order was silence. The wild laughter of pirates was gone. The world grew tidy, efficient, industrial. Freedom was replaced by profit. And yet, even in the 19th and 20th centuries, that old longing for salt wind and open horizons remained in human hearts. Every sailor who ever looked at the sea and wondered what lay beyond owed something to those lost men of the 17th century. They lived horribly, yes, but they lived completely, without apology. The black flag, the Jolly Roger, was never just a warning. It was a declaration. It meant we will not live by your rules. It meant we will die on our own terms. The skull and bones were not symbols of death. They were symbols of choice, of daring to live freely, even for a moment, when the world demanded submission. And though the sails have rotted and the cannons rusted, that flag still flies, in stories, in songs, in every dream of escape. The horrible life of pirates was not glorious. It was hunger, violence, disease, and despair. But it was also something the world still envies. A glimpse of freedom so pure that men would die for it. Centuries after the last black flag fell, the bones of pirates resurfaced. Not in the sand, but behind glass. Museums began to display rusted pistols, fragments of rope, and the iron manacles once used to drag prisoners to their deaths. Visitors leaned in, fascinated. Children pressed their noses to the glass. They didn't see hunger or fear. They saw adventure. The horror had softened into history. At the National Maritime Museum in Greenwich, a piece of a pirate's flag still hangs. Its black cloth, frayed and thin, carries the faint scent of salt. It is easy to forget what it once meant. A promise that no quarter would be given, no mercy asked. Now, under gentle lights, it flutters quietly. A relic, no longer a threat. The myth of buried treasure became the most enduring lie of all. Stories told of gold hidden on Caribbean islands, of cursed maps and secret keys. But in truth, pirates never had time for such fantasies. Every coin they captured was spent in days, on drink, women, or repairs. Gold was heavy and time was short. The only treasure buried was the pirates themselves, when storms or hangings took them. Yet even today, treasure hunters scour the seas with sonar and divers, chasing the shimmer of lost riches. They find wrecks sometimes and pieces of history. But the real treasure lies not in gold. It lies in the unending fascination with the men who dared to defy the world. In the 20th century, the pirates were reborn again, this time on screen. Hollywood took the filth and fear out of piracy and replaced it with laughter, color, and romance. The 1935 film Captain Blood, starring Errol Flynn, painted pirates as swashbuckling heroes, noble men fighting tyranny. Later, Disney's Pirates of the Caribbean series turned them into immortals, cursed yet charming. Audiences cheered for men who, in truth, would have robbed and killed them without hesitation. The sea that had once devoured sailors was now a glittering stage. The black flag became a brand. The horrors became joy. And the world, eager for wonder, not truth, accepted the lie with a smile. Yet, even through the fantasy, something of the real sea survived. Listen to the soundtracks of those films. The crash of drums, the swelling strings. They carry the rhythm of the ocean, the heartbeat of wind and wave. It stirs something ancient, that longing for freedom, for danger, for life without walls. Even if the image is false, the emotion is real. Perhaps that is why the legend endures. Because beneath every romantic mask, there lies a truth we cannot escape, the call of the sea. For those who study history closely, the truth never vanishes. The pirates' world was brutal beyond imagination. Hunger, infections, amputations without anesthesia. They slept in filth, ate moldy biscuits, and lived in constant fear of storms, mutiny, or capture. When caught, their bodies were displayed as warnings, tarred and hung from iron cages along the Thames. Children were made to see them, to learn obedience through terror. There was nothing romantic in their deaths. Yet somehow we remember them more kindly than kings. Perhaps because their suffering was honest, their crimes open. They didn't hide their greed or their rage behind crowns and titles. They were what the world itself secretly was. Ruthless, hungry, ungovernable. Among the sea's outlaws, a few women defied every expectation. And Bonnie and Mary Red became legends. Not because they lived well, but because they refused to be invisible. They dressed as men, fought beside their crews, and cursed as fiercely as any captain. When captured, they stood trial in Jamaica. Both claimed to be pregnant, and thus were spared the noose for a while. And Bonnie's last recorded words to her lover, Jack Rackham, were whispered through prison bars. "Had you fought like a man, you need not have been hanged like a dog." Her fate after that remains uncertain. Some say she escaped and lived quietly under another name. Others say she died in her cell, unrecorded, forgotten. Their stories, though tragic, gave shape to something rare. The idea that rebellion belongs to no gender. Under the waves, thousands of wrecks lie scattered. Broken timbers, cannons, and human remains. These are not the ships of heroes. They are the graves of sailors, pirates and navy men alike, who vanished into storms without song or glory. The Caribbean, the Indian Ocean, the coast of West Africa. All are vast cemeteries without crosses. Marine archaeologists call it the ghost fleet. Every year new wrecks are found. And every time the evidence tells the same story. Men desperate to survive, living on salt water and violence, until the sea finally took them back. It is a quiet reminder that the ocean forgets nothing. In the modern age, historians continue to unearth the truth behind the myth. They read letters, ship logs, trial records, each stained with ink and grief. They find evidence of pirate councils, of democratic votes, of shared spoils, but also of cruelty and chaos. No single story captures the whole truth. Every pirate was both oppressor and oppressed, both rebel and criminal. To study them is to study the raw edge of humanity, what men become when law and hope are gone. And perhaps that's why they still fascinate us. Because their story is our reflection, stripped of comfort, bare and brutal. Piracy did not die with Blackbeard, merely changed form. Today, off the coasts of Somalia, West Africa, and parts of Southeast Asia, modern pirates still board cargo ships with assault rifles instead of cutlasses. They are not rebels or adventurers. They are poor men, trapped by poverty and corruption, seeking survival in lawless waters. The same hunger, the same desperation, the same salt-soaked fate. History repeats, even when we pretend it doesn't. The flags are gone, but the reasons remain. When you hear the sound of waves, when you stand at a shore and stare at the endless horizon, some part of you understands what they felt. That ache for freedom, that dangerous, beautiful longing to see what lies beyond. It's buried deep in the human soul, the memory of those who once defied the world. We may call them villains or heroes, but in truth they were simply mirrors, showing us what it means to want more than the world allows. The horrible life of pirates ended long ago, but the dream they carried, the dream of living free, never died. In modern classrooms, the story of piracy is taught in fragments. A paragraph here, a chapter there. Teachers speak of the golden age of pirates between 1650 and 1730, but rarely of what made it golden. Not glory, but greed and desperation. Children learn the names: Blackbeard, Calico Jack, and Bonnie, Henry Morgan. But few learn the smell of unwashed decks, the fear of drowning, the sound of chains scraping wood. History books clean the story, polish it, make it safe. Yet the truth, the cruel human truth, lies between the lines. That these were not mythical men, but sailors who rose from poverty and died beneath the waves, hunted and hungry. If one listens carefully, even the silence between lessons seems to whisper what textbooks forget. That freedom, when born of despair, is never gentle. Across the world, small maritime museums keep the memory alive. In Port Royal, once called the wickedest city on earth, exhibits tell of the great earthquake that sank half the town into the sea in 1692. The waters there still hide sunken taverns and bottles of rum sealed in mud. In Bristol and Nantes, the ports that once sent ships of trade and terror, Visitors walk through galleries that smell faintly of salt and rope. They see cannonballs, pistols, coins, and the grim iron cage once used to display the bodies of executed pirates. Each artifact whispers a warning, not of adventure, but of what happens when men chase wealth through blood. And still, children point at the flags and smile. They see courage, not cruelty. Perhaps that is how time forgives us, by dulling the pain until only the story remains. Every year, in seaside towns from the Caribbean to England, people gather in pirate costumes. They paint skulls on sails, wear fake beards, and fire toy muskets into the air. There is laughter, music, and the smell of roasted food. The black flag flies again, but now it flutters over parades, not battles. In those moments, the line between memory and myth blurs completely. The pirates return, not as men of hunger and fear, but as symbols of rebellion, fun, and freedom. Perhaps it is not wrong to celebrate them. Perhaps we need myths like theirs, reminders of what it means to resist, even when doomed. Still, the sea beyond those festivals remains the same, endless, cold, and patient. It knows what truly happened. Modern facial reconstructions, based on skeletal remains found in shipwrecks, show the truth. The faces are gaunt, scarred, their teeth broken, their bones worn from labor. Most were in their 20s, some not even that. Their ribs show signs of malnutrition. Their wrists, grooves from shackles or ropes. These were the real pirates. Not handsome rogues, but children of poverty and war, driven to sea because the land offered nothing. And though their crimes were many, their suffering was greater. The sea was not their choice. It was their escape. And the life they found, there was no freedom. Only another kind of prison, this one without walls. Today, only a few wooden ships from that era survive. At maritime heritage docks, volunteers mend sails, polish decks, and speak softly of the men who once sailed them. The ropes creak, the wood sighs. Seagulls cry above, just as they did 3 centuries ago. Close your eyes for a moment, and you can almost hear the old life return. Boots on planks, the clink of cutlasses, the wind carrying shouted orders across the water. Then silence again. The sea outlasts everything. Men, ships, stories. It keeps the rhythm of centuries, unchanged and indifferent. If ghosts exist, they surely sail there still, unseen, forever chasing a horizon that never ends. Historians, archaeologists, and maritime divers now dedicate their lives to piecing together the lost truth. They dive in dark waters where sunlight barely reaches. They touch the timbers of ships once feared by empires. Every discovery, a spoon, a ring, a bullet, tells of the daily lives of men who have been reduced to legends. One archaeologist once said, "When you lift an object from a wreck, you're touching a heartbeat that stopped 300 years ago." The work is slow, patient, reverent. Each find is a whisper from the deep, a reminder that the ocean remembers every soul it ever swallowed. When wind moves through the rigging of an old ship, it creates a low hum, a mournful tone that sailors once called the voice of the dead. In harbors where pirate ships once anchored, that sound still lingers. Tourists rarely notice it. But late at night, when the crowds have gone, the water grows calm and the air cool. You can hear it, a hollow, distant sigh, like breath caught between wood and wave. It sounds like memory itself, fragile, echoing, endless. Maybe the sea keeps speaking because it knows that we, the living, are the forgetful ones. In recent decades, writers have tried to reclaim the truth. Books and documentaries have shown the real faces of piracy, the hunger, the pain, the fleeting moments of rebellion. They write not to glorify, but to understand. The pirate, stripped of fantasy, becomes a symbol of something deeply human. The struggle between freedom and morality, between survival and cruelty. Through these stories, we learn not to envy the pirates, but to pity them, and perhaps to recognize a piece of ourselves in their defiance. For we all, in some way, sail against the wind. Every generation reshapes the story. For Victorians, pirates were adventure. For the 20th century, they were rebellion. For us, they are caution, reminders of how easily desperation turns to violence, how greed consumes freedom itself. And yet, despite everything, the pirate remains. He lives in songs, in festivals, in dreams of the sea. He stands as a shadow, both hero and villain, whispering across time. Perhaps it's because we need him, to remind us that freedom is never easy, never clean, and always paid for in full. Somewhere tonight, waves roll quietly against an empty shore. The stars above shine on the same waters where pirates once sailed. No sails cut the horizon now, only light from distant ships, moving slowly toward unseen lands. The world has changed, but the sea has not. It watches, eternal and silent, keeping the secrets of all who dared to challenge it. And if you listen closely, in that stillness where wind meets water, you might hear a faint echo of laughter, rough and hoarse, carried through centuries of salt and storm. Pirates are gone, but their story and their warning will never sink. When the storms passed, the sea always fell silent. Long after the screams and thunder faded, only the sound of water remained, lapping softly against the broken wood that floated on its surface. Sometimes survivors clung to planks, their fingers numb and eyes empty, whispering prayers that the waves did not care to hear. More often there were no survivors at all. The ocean, vast and patient, simply carried on. And centuries later, that silence still lingers, as though the sea itself remembers the horrors it has witnessed and chooses to keep them quiet. If you stand by the shore on a calm night, close your eyes and listen, you can almost feel it, the weight of stories the sea refuses to speak aloud. Every storm leaves behind salt, crusted on decks, stinging in wounds, clinging to skin like memory. It was the scent of every pirate's life, sweat, decay, and sea. No matter how many times they washed, the salt never left them. Even when they came ashore to drink or to fight, the sea followed them, in their clothes, their breath, their bones. It marked them, as if the ocean had claimed them long before death did. And now, when we stand by the shore, that same salt fills the air, the same wind, the same scent. It is the ocean's quiet way of reminding us that it remembers everyone it ever owned. At night, sailors once said the sea spoke, in the creak of masts, in the sigh of the wind between ropes. They heard whispers in those sounds, the ghosts of the drowned calling to the living. Come back, they said, or perhaps, stay away. To those who live by the sea, the sound is familiar, not frightening, just endlessly mournful. It is the song of all that was lost. If you listen in stillness, with eyes closed and heart quiet, you can almost make out the voices, soft, distant, echoing from beneath the waves. It is not a haunting, but a remembrance. The ocean never forgets its dead. Every pirate dreamt of reaching land, a quiet cove, a warm fire, a night without fear. But most never did. Their lives ended in storms, or ropes, or hunger. Those few who escaped the gallows found that peace on land was harder than war at sea. They were men without homes, without names, too wild to settle and too weary to keep sailing. In their final years, many drank themselves into silence, staring at the waves as if waiting for something. Perhaps forgiveness, perhaps the call of the sea to take them back. And when they died, no one sang. The sea simply rolled on, erasing their footprints, swallowing their stories whole. Beneath the waves, all things are quiet. The sunlight fades into green, then blue, then darkness. Coral grows around old cannons. Fish drift through shattered hulls. Here, the bones of pirates rest beside those of their enemies, indistinguishable now, side by side in the silence they once feared. There is no greed here, no hatred, no flag. Only the gentle rhythm of water and the slow breath of the deep. If there is peace for them, it is here, not in glory but in stillness. Centuries have passed since the last pirate sailed, but time at sea does not move as it does on land. The waves still strike the same cliffs. The stars still hang above the same waters. The same moonlight that once shone on their decks now glimmers on ours. We walk on shores they knew without knowing their names. We sail in ships powered by engines, not wind, yet still guided by the same stars. And though their bones have turned to sand, their stories move with the tide, retold, reshaped, reimagined, but never gone. Perhaps that is the truest kind of immortality. There is something eternal in the line where the sky meets the sea. It draws the eyes, the heart, the imagination. The pirates followed it, chasing a promise that could never be reached. Freedom, wealth, escape, it was all there, always beyond reach. Even now, when we stand before that same horizon, a small part of us understands them. That restless ache, that hunger for more than the world allows. It is the same longing that drives every explorer, every dreamer, every wanderer. The same whisper that says, there must be something beyond this. The pirates may have lived horribly, but they lived chasing that whisper. If the sea reflects the sky, then perhaps it also reflects us. Every generation that gazes into it sees its own reflection, its fears, its hopes, its hunger. The pirates saw power and took it. We see freedom and seek it. But the sea remains the same, indifferent to what we project upon it. It accepts all who enter and forgets none. It is the world's oldest witness, and the truest historian. When night falls upon the ocean, the world seems to pause. The wind softens, the water smooths, the stars appear in the silence. This is how it must have looked to the pirates in their final moments. The sea wide and endless, their fates sealed by the dawn. Some prayed, some cursed. Some simply watched the horizon fade into black and let the sea take them. And perhaps in those last breaths, they found a kind of calm. Not peace, but acceptance. For the sea, cruel as it is, holds all who surrender to it. If you listen now, wherever you are, the sea still speaks. Not in words, but in rhythm. The steady hush of waves against stone. The sigh of wind moving through the world. It tells the story of every sailor, every wanderer, every soul who dared to face it. It tells of their hunger, their cruelty, their courage, and their end. And in its whisper, there is a message. That all freedom, all rebellion, all defiance come with a price, and that the sea always collects it. The horrible life of pirates is over, but their lesson remains, written not in books, but in the endless breath of the tide. And now, dear listener, the sea is quiet. All the storms have passed. All the guns have fallen silent, and the screams of the dying have faded into the endless hush of the waves. The story of the pirates, the hungry, violent, desperate souls who once ruled these waters, has come to an end. Their sails are torn. Their bones lie buried beneath coral and sand. Their names forgotten except for the ones that history chose to remember. But the sea remembers them all. Every whisper of wind that touches the waves tonight carries some part of their story. If you close your eyes now and listen, you can almost hear it. That faint rhythm, the breath of the ocean. The same sound they heard before their final dawn. The sea never truly forgives. It keeps its secrets, it guards its dead, and it hums their stories quietly beneath the surface. Those who lived and died as pirates, they were men of hunger, for gold, for power, for escape. They sought freedom, and in doing so, they found the edge of the world and fell into it. Their lives were harsh, full of salt and fire, of rope-burned hands and sleepless nights, of battles fought for treasures that slipped through their fingers like sand. And yet, they remind us of something deeply human. That wild, unending wish to be free, to break from the chains of the world, even if it means drowning in the attempt. That is why their story endures. Not because they were heroes, but because they were utterly, painfully human. Let the sound of the sea carry you. Imagine it, the endless horizon, glowing faintly in the moonlight. The water is calm now. The waves rise and fall, slow and steady like breathing. You can feel the cool mist on your face, the scent of salt, the whisper of the wind. Everything is still. The chaos of life, the noise, the rush, all gone. Only the sea remains, quiet, eternal. Take a deep breath in. Let it fill your chest, the way the wind fills the sails of an old ship. Now exhale slowly. Let the noise leave with your breath. Pirates are gone. The ships are gone. But the sea remains, always breathing, always remembering. The story of the pirates is not one of glory, but of warning. That freedom without mercy becomes destruction. That greed without limit devours the soul. And yet, beneath all the horror, there was still that flicker. That same flame that burns in every heart that looks to the horizon and whispers, "There must be something more." That longing still exists even now. You can feel it, can't you? That pull, that ache, that curiosity about the world beyond the safe edge of life. It's the same longing that led them to sea. And maybe that is what makes us kin. Not in their cruelty, but in their courage to face the unknown. The sea sleeps, but lightly. Now let the waves grow softer in your mind. The deck beneath your feet disappears. The sails vanish into the stars. The world grows quiet. You are floating now. Not sinking, not sailing. Just resting between the water and the sky. There is peace here. The kind of peace the pirates never found. The kind that comes only when we stop searching and simply let ourselves drift. The sea hums below you. The stars shimmer above. And somewhere in the distance, a gull cries. One note, then silence. The world feels infinite, and yet so calm. Take another breath. Slowly, the air moves through you like the tide. Now, the horrible life of pirates was never truly about the sea. It was about us, about what we become when we chase freedom so far that we forget what it costs. Now, the story ends not with violence, but with stillness. Not with fire, but with water. Not with a scream, but with a whisper. The whisper of waves against the shore. The whisper of time moving forward. The whisper that says softly, "Rest now." Because the sea never sleeps. But you can. Close your eyes. Let the sound of the ocean fill the quiet around you. The storms are over. The sails are down. The deck is calm beneath your feet. And somewhere, far beyond the edge of the world, the ghosts of the pirates drift at peace. Their battles long ended. Their ships at last at rest. So take one more deep breath. And let go. The story is finished. But the sea never ends.